Hello and welcome. Vasco da Gama was a brave man from Portugal. He was not just a sailor, he was a hero who changed the world. He lived more than 500 years ago, in a time when many parts of the world were still unknown to people in Europe. The sea was full of danger. The maps were not clear. But Vasco da Gama had a dream, to find a way to India by sea. He wanted to open a new path for trade and friendship. Vasco da Gama was born in a small town called Sines, in Portugal. From a young age, he was strong, smart, and full of curiosity. He loved the sea. He loved learning about the world. At that time, Portugal was a country full of sailors and explorers. They believed the sea could take them to new lands and great treasures. Vasco da Gama wanted to be one of those explorers. The King of Portugal chose Vasco da Gama for a special mission. The king said, "Sail around Africa and find India." This was not easy. Many had tried and failed. But Vasco da Gama was not afraid. He believed in his team, his ships, and his dream. He left Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, in the year 1497, with 4 ships and a strong heart. His journey was long and hard. The sea was wild. The wind was strong. His men became tired and sick. But Vasco da Gama never gave up. After many months, he reached India in 1498. This was a great moment in history. It was the first time a European had reached India by sea. The world was now connected in a new way. Vasco da Gama's courage changed trade, travel, and world history. He helped connect the people of Europe and Asia. He brought back spices, stories, and new ideas. He became a hero in Portugal and around the world. Today, we remember Vasco da Gama not just for his journey, but for his spirit. He showed that with courage and belief, even the biggest dreams can come true. His life teaches us to be brave, to explore, and to never give up, no matter how big the ocean in front of us may be. Vasco da Gama's story is more than just about ships and travel. It is about hope, challenge, and discovery. It is the story of a man who looked at the unknown and said, "Let's go." That is why his name is still remembered today, in books, in schools, and in hearts. This episode will take you on a journey through his life. You will learn how he faced danger, made history, and changed the world. Get ready to sail with Vasco da Gama, the man who dared to dream big. Chapter 1: Early Life and Background of Vasco da Gama, 500 words. Vasco da Gama was born in the year 1460 or 1469, in a small town called Sines. Sines is in Portugal, a country in Europe. His father's name was Estevão da Gama. He was a knight and worked for the king. Vasco's mother was Isabel Soter. She came from a family with English roots. Vasco was born into a noble family. This means his family was respected and had some power. Vasco da Gama had many brothers. He was one of the younger children in his family. His family lived near the sea, so from a young age, Vasco saw ships and sailors. He watched the waves and listened to stories about the sea. These stories made him curious about the world. He wanted to explore faraway places. As a boy, Vasco studied in school. He learned mathematics, astronomy, and how to sail. He also learned how to read and write in Latin, which was important at that time. These skills helped him later in life when he became a great explorer. Portugal was a country of sailors. The people of Portugal believed the sea could lead them to new lands, riches, and spices. At this time, land routes to India and Asia were long and dangerous. People wanted a sea route to make trade easier and faster. The kings of Portugal supported explorers and gave them ships, maps, and men. This time in history is called the Age of Discovery. Vasco da Gama grew up during this exciting time. He heard about great men like Prince Henry the Navigator and Bartholomew Dias. Dias had already sailed around the tip of Africa, called the Cape of Good Hope. But no one had yet reached India by sea. This was still a dream. As Vasco grew older, he joined the navy. He became strong, brave, and skilled at sailing. He learned how to lead men, how to sail in strong winds, and how to use stars to find direction. These were important skills for an explorer. The King of Portugal noticed Vasco da Gama's talent. The king believed Vasco was the right man for a big task. He wanted someone to find a sea route to India. This was not an easy job. It needed someone who was smart, brave, and strong. Vasco da Gama was chosen for this important mission. Vasco da Gama's early life was full of learning and preparing. From a young age, he saw the sea not as something to fear, but as a path to something great. He dreamed of faraway lands and believed he could reach them. This dream would soon come true. His early years shaped the man he would become. A man ready to face the unknown. A man ready to change history. A man ready to sail beyond the map. Chapter 2. Portugal's Age of Discovery, 500 words. In the time of Vasco da Gama, Portugal was a small country with big dreams. It was the 15th century, and the people of Portugal wanted to know more about the world. They wanted to find new lands, new people, and new trade routes. This time in history is called the Age of Discovery. The Age of Discovery was a time when many explorers sailed across the oceans. They wanted to find faster ways to reach countries like India and China. These countries had gold, spices, and silk. These goods were very valuable in Europe. But traveling by land was long and dangerous. So the people of Portugal thought, let's try to go by sea. The King of Portugal gave money and ships to people who wanted to explore. He wanted Portugal to be the first country to find a sea route to India. One important person was Prince Henry the Navigator. He started a school to teach sailors how to read maps, use stars to find direction, and build better ships. He helped many people become great explorers. Because of Prince Henry's work, Portugal became strong in sea travel. Portuguese sailors started to go further and further down the coast of Africa. They discovered new places like Madeira, the Azores, and the Cape Verde Islands. These were small steps toward finding a sea path to India. In 1488, a sailor named Bartholomew Dias reached the southern tip of Africa. He called it the Cape of Good Hope. This was a big moment. It showed that it was possible to sail around Africa and maybe reach India. But Dias did not go all the way. The journey was still too long and too hard. Now, the Portuguese king needed someone brave enough to go beyond the Cape of Good Hope. He wanted to find a sea route to India. That person would be Vasco da Gama. Portugal's Age of Discovery gave Vasco da Gama the chance to do something great. He had good ships, trained sailors, and maps made by earlier explorers. He also had the support of the king. The people of Portugal believed in him. They hoped he would find India and bring back riches and fame. This age was not only about trade. It was also about learning. Portuguese sailors brought back stories, plants, animals, and ideas from other parts of the world. They helped Europe learn more about geography, nature, and different cultures. The Age of Discovery was a time of courage and adventure. Many people took big risks. Some did not return. But because of their brave journeys, the world became more connected. For Vasco da Gama, this age was the beginning of something big. He was ready to take the next step. He was ready to sail into the unknown, guided by the stars, maps, and the dreams of a small but powerful country, Portugal. Chapter 3. The Mission to Reach India, 500 words. Vasco da Gama was given a very special job. The King of Portugal, King Manuel I, chose him to find a sea route to India. This was a big mission. No one from Europe had ever sailed all the way to India before. The king believed Vasco da Gama was brave, smart, and ready for the challenge. In the year 1497, the mission began. Vasco da Gama had 4 ships and about 170 men. The ships were filled with food, water, tools, and gifts to give to the people they might meet. They also carried goods like cloth, gold, and silver for trade. The goal of the mission was clear: sail around Africa and reach India by sea. This would help Portugal trade for spices, like pepper and cinnamon. These spices were very valuable in Europe. They made food taste better and could be used to keep food fresh. On July 8, 1497, Vasco da Gama and his men left Lisbon, the capital of Portugal. The people watched from the shore and waved goodbye. It was a moment of great hope and pride. The journey was long and difficult. The ships first sailed south along the coast of Africa. They stopped at islands and small towns to rest and get more food and water. Then, they sailed to the Cape of Good Hope, the southern tip of Africa. The sea there was very rough. Huge waves and strong winds made it hard to move forward. But Vasco da Gama and his sailors stayed strong. After passing the Cape, the ships moved up the eastern coast of Africa. They stopped in places like Mozambique and Malindi. Some people helped them. Others did not trust them. But in Malindi, a local guide gave Vasco da Gama important help. This guide knew the way to India and helped lead the ships across the Indian Ocean. With his help, Vasco da Gama and his crew sailed for many days. They faced storms and sickness. Many men became tired and weak. But they did not give up. Finally, after more than 10 months at sea, they reached the city of Calicut, in India, in May 1498. This was a great success. Vasco da Gama was the first European to reach India by sea. He had completed the king's mission. In Calicut, Vasco da Gama met local leaders and traders. He showed them the gifts and asked to trade. At first, the people in India were not very impressed with the goods he brought. Still, the sea route was now open. Vasco da Gama's mission changed history. It showed that Europe and Asia could be connected by sea. It opened a new chapter in trade and exploration. The mission to India was full of danger and adventure. But Vasco da Gama proved that with courage and strong will, anything is possible. His journey was just beginning. Chapter 4, Voyage Around the Cape of Good Hope, 500 words. After leaving Lisbon in July 1497, Vasco da Gama and his ships sailed south along the coast of Africa. The journey was long, and the sea was sometimes calm and sometimes wild. The men on the ships worked hard every day. They cleaned the ships, fixed sails, and cooked food. They also watched the sea carefully to stay safe. As they got closer to the southern end of Africa, the weather began to change. The winds became strong, and the waves grew tall. This part of the sea was known as very dangerous. Many sailors were afraid of it. It was called the Cape of Good Hope. The Cape of Good Hope is at the southern tip of Africa. Long ago, people called it the Cape of Storms because of the rough seas and bad weather. But the Portuguese king gave it a new name, Good Hope, because he believed it would lead them to India. Vasco da Gama knew that crossing the Cape was one of the most important parts of the journey. It was also one of the hardest. The ships had to fight against strong winds and huge waves. The men were tired and scared, but they trusted Vasco da Gama. He stayed calm and gave clear orders. For many days, they sailed carefully around the Cape. They worked together as a team. Some days the wind pushed them back. Other days they made good progress. They watched the sky, the sea, and the stars to stay on the right path. Finally, after many difficult days, they passed the Cape of Good Hope. It was a great moment. The sailors were very happy. They had made it through the most dangerous part of the journey. They thanked God and cheered for their captain. After passing the Cape, the sea became calmer. The ships started sailing up the east coast of Africa. They stopped in places like Mozambique, Mombasa, and Malindi. In these places, they met local people and traded goods. Some towns welcomed them. Others were not friendly. But Vasco da Gama stayed focused on his goal, reaching India. Passing the Cape of Good Hope was more than just a part of the journey. It was a symbol of courage, teamwork, and strong will. Many sailors before had tried and failed. But Vasco da Gama and his crew succeeded. They showed that it was possible to sail beyond the known world. This part of the voyage helped Portugal become a powerful sea nation. It also helped open the way for future trips to Asia. The success of crossing the Cape gave hope to many others. The voyage around the Cape of Good Hope was one of the bravest steps in Vasco da Gama's journey. It proved that with good leadership, strong hearts and clear goals, People can face even the wildest seas and keep going forward. Chapter 5. Arrival in Calicut, 500 words. After many months at sea, Vasco da Gama and his ships finally reached the coast of India. It was May 1498 when they arrived in a city called Calicut. Calicut was a busy port on the southwest coast of India. It was full of people, ships, and markets. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, and cloves were sold there. These spices were very valuable in Europe. The journey from Portugal to Calicut had been long and hard. The sailors were tired, and many had become sick. But when they saw the land, they were happy and full of hope. They had done something that no one in Europe had done before. They had found a sea route to India. Vasco da Gama sent one of his men to speak with the local people. He wanted to meet the ruler of Calicut, who was known as the Zamorin. The Zamorin was a powerful king and controlled the trade in the region. Vasco da Gama hoped to make a good connection and begin trading. At first, the people of Calicut were curious. They had never seen men from so far away. Vasco da Gama and his crew wore different clothes and spoke a different language. Still, they were welcomed and allowed to visit the Zamorin's court. Vasco da Gama gave the Zamorin some gifts from Portugal. These included hats, cloth, sugar, oil, and silver. But the gifts were simple, and the Zamorin was not very impressed. He was used to receiving gold, gems, and fine goods from Arab and Indian traders. Even though the gifts were not special, Vasco da Gama explained that he had come in peace. He said he wanted to trade spices and build a good friendship between Portugal and India. The Zamorin listened, but some local merchants were not happy. They did not want new traders from Europe to take away their business. Vasco da Gama stayed in Calicut for a few weeks. He watched the markets, learned about the trade system, and spoke with many people. He also sent messages back to Portugal to tell the king about the success of the journey. After some time, Vasco da Gama decided to leave. He had reached his goal. He had found India by sea. Now it was time to return home and share the news. The arrival in Calicut was a turning point in world history. It opened a new path between Europe and Asia. It changed trade forever and brought new ideas and cultures together. For Vasco da Gama and his crew, it was a moment of pride. They had done something great. They had crossed oceans, faced storms, and reached a land full of wonder. Their journey showed that with courage and determination, anything is possible. The story of their arrival in Calicut is still remembered today as the moment when two great worlds met, across the sea, through brave hearts, and with the dream of discovery. Chapter 6. Challenges and Conflicts in India, 500 words. Vasco da Gama's arrival in Calicut was a great moment, but it was not easy. After reaching India, he and his crew faced many challenges and conflicts. Life in Calicut was very different from life in Portugal. The people, the culture, the food, and the language were all new. Vasco da Gama had to learn quickly and act carefully. One of the first problems was with the gifts. Vasco da Gama gave the local king, the Zamorin, gifts like cloth, sugar, oil, and silver. But these gifts were simple compared to what other traders gave. Arab and Indian traders brought gold, jewels, and fine goods. The Zamorin was not impressed. He expected more from a visitor who had come from far away. Another problem was trust. The Arab merchants in Calicut had been trading there for many years. They did not like the arrival of the Portuguese. They were afraid that Vasco da Gama would take over their trade. They began to tell the Zamorin that the Portuguese were not good people. They said Vasco da Gama was not honest and could not be trusted. Vasco da Gama also had a hard time communicating. He did not speak the local language. He had to use translators, but sometimes messages were not clear. This made it difficult to make good agreements. Misunderstandings happened, and this caused tension between the Portuguese and the people of Calicut. The Portuguese wanted to trade for spices, especially pepper. But the local traders asked for gold or fine items in return. Vasco da Gama did not have enough of these. So, the trading was not very successful. Some local people thought the Portuguese were poor and not serious traders. There were also religious differences. The people in Calicut followed Hinduism and Islam. Vasco da Gama and his crew were Christians. They did not understand the local customs and beliefs. Sometimes, their actions seemed rude, even if they didn't mean to be. This made the local people upset. At one point, there was a conflict between Vasco da Gama and the local leaders. They argued about trading rights and respect. Vasco da Gama became angry and decided to leave Calicut without making a strong trade deal. Some of his men were left behind, and they were taken prisoner. This made the relationship worse. Even after Vasco da Gama left India, the problems did not end. When he came back to India years later, he used force to get what he wanted. He attacked ships, blockaded ports, and tried to control trade by using power. This led to more fighting and conflict between the Portuguese and the local people. The challenges and conflicts in India showed that exploring new lands was not just about sailing. It was also about understanding people, building trust, and respecting cultures. Vasco da Gama's time in India was not easy, but it was an important part of his journey. From these challenges, we learn that success in new places takes more than bravery. It takes patience, respect, and good communication. Chapter 7, Return to Portugal and Hero's Welcome, 500 words. After many months in India, Vasco da Gama decided it was time to return to Portugal. His journey had been long and difficult. He had reached India and opened the sea route, but he also faced many problems. Now, he wanted to go home and tell the king about his success. In August 1498, Vasco da Gama and his men left Calicut and began their return journey. The sea was not calm. There were strong winds and big waves. Many of the sailors were tired and sick. Some had died in India, and others became weak from hunger and illness. The journey back was even harder than the trip to India. One of the biggest problems was scurvy, a disease caused by not eating fresh fruits and vegetables. Many sailors suffered from it. Their gums bled, their teeth fell out, and they had no energy. Vasco da Gama lost many men on the way home. Only about half of the original crew survived the journey. Even with all these troubles, Vasco da Gama stayed strong. He led his ships carefully around the Cape of Good Hope again. He stopped at friendly ports along the east coast of Africa to get food and water. After many more months at sea, the ships finally reached Portugal in September 1499. When Vasco da Gama arrived in Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, the people were excited. News of his return spread quickly. He was the first European to sail to India and back. This was a big moment in history. People came out to see him. They cheered and celebrated. The king and the royal court welcomed him like a hero. King Manuel I was very pleased. He had given Vasco da Gama a great mission, and Vasco had completed it. The king gave him rich rewards, a new title, and great honor. He was called Admiral of the Indian Seas. This meant he was now one of the most important men in Portugal. The journey was not just a success for Vasco da Gama. It was a success for Portugal. The country now had a sea route to India. This made Portugal stronger in trade and more powerful in the world. Soon, more ships would follow the same path. Spices and other goods began to come from India to Europe. This made the country rich. People looked up to Vasco da Gama. He became a symbol of bravery and discovery. Children learned his name in school. His journey showed that big dreams could come true with courage and hard work. Vasco da Gama's return to Portugal was not just the end of a journey. It was the beginning of a new age for Portugal and the world. He had opened a door across the sea, and many others would follow. This hero's welcome was well-deserved. He had faced storms, sickness, and danger, but he never gave up. He showed the world the power of determination and the spirit of exploration. Chapter 8, Second Voyage to India, 500 words. After the great success of his first journey to India, Vasco da Gama became a hero in Portugal. The king was very happy with him. Trade with India had started, and spices began to arrive in Europe. But there were still many problems in India. The Portuguese wanted to control the spice trade, but the Arab traders and some Indian rulers did not want them there. In the year 1502, King Manuel I sent Vasco da Gama on a second voyage to India. This time, it was not just about discovery. It was about power, protection, and control. The Portuguese wanted to make sure their trade was safe and strong. Vasco da Gama left Portugal with a large fleet of 20 ships and about 1,500 men. This fleet was bigger and stronger than the first one. The ships had cannons and were ready to fight if needed. The second voyage was more like a military mission than an exploration. As they sailed along the coast of Africa, the Portuguese stopped at ports and sometimes used force to show their power. They also made deals with local rulers who were friendly to them. Vasco da Gama wanted to show that Portugal was now a strong sea power. When the fleet reached Calicut in India, things were not peaceful. Vasco da Gama asked the Zamarin, the ruler of Calicut, to punish the traders who had caused problems during his first visit. But the Zamarin refused. He did not want to take orders from the Portuguese. Vasco da Gama became angry. He used his ships to block the port so that other traders could not do business. He also attacked ships that belonged to Arab merchants. These ships were carrying goods and people, but Vasco da Gama showed no mercy. He wanted to send a message that Portugal was serious about controlling the trade. These actions caused a lot of fear and anger. Many people in India began to see the Portuguese not as visitors, but as invaders. Still, Vasco da Gama made deals with other cities like Cochin and Cananor, where the local rulers were more friendly to the Portuguese. These cities became important Portuguese trading centers. After completing his mission, Vasco da Gama returned to Portugal. The king rewarded him again, and the Portuguese trade in India continued to grow. The second voyage helped Portugal build trading posts and begin a colonial empire in Asia. But this second journey was different from the first. It was no longer just about exploration. It was about power, money, and control. Vasco da Gama had opened the sea route to India, but now Portugal wanted to own it. The second voyage to India changed history. It showed how the age of exploration was becoming the age of empire. And it showed that Vasco da Gama was not just an explorer, he was now also a man of war. Chapter 9. Final Years and Governorship in India, 500 words. After his two important journeys to India, Vasco da Gama stayed in Portugal for many years. He was a rich and famous man. The king gave him land, money, and a special title. He was called the Count of Vidigueira. Vasco da Gama had a large house, a family, and children. Many people respected him for his great work in opening the sea route to India. But Portugal still had problems in India. The Portuguese wanted to control trade, but there were many fights with local rulers and other traders. There were also problems with the Portuguese leaders in India. Some of them were unfair and greedy. The King of Portugal wanted someone strong and honest to bring order. So, in the year 1524, the king asked Vasco da Gama to go to India one more time. This time, he would not go as an explorer. He would go as the Viceroy of India. A viceroy is a high leader who rules a land in the name of the king. Vasco da Gama accepted the job, even though he was now an old man, around 60 years old. Vasco da Gama left Portugal for the third time, sailing once again across the ocean to India. When he arrived, he went to the city of Goa, which was now an important Portuguese center. His job was to fix the problems in the government. He wanted to stop corruption, improve trade, and bring peace. As viceroy, Vasco da Gama worked very hard. He replaced some bad leaders and tried to make the Portuguese rule more fair. He wrote letters to the king, explaining what was happening in India. He made plans to help the people and build better relationships with local rulers. But Vasco da Gama's health was not good. The long trip and the hard work made him tired and sick. He had many health problems and was often in pain. Still, he continued to work until he could no longer lead. Just a few months after arriving in India, Vasco da Gama became very ill. On December 24, 1524, he died in the city of Cochin. He was buried there at first, but many years later, his body was taken back to Portugal and buried again with great honor. Vasco da Gama's final years were full of duty and service. He returned to India not for glory, but to help his country and bring order. Even in old age, he showed courage and leadership. His work helped Portugal become one of the strongest trading powers in the world. He was not only a great explorer but also a strong leader. Vasco da Gama's life teaches us that true greatness is not only about discovery. It is also about service, responsibility, and helping others. His final years remind us that even heroes must work hard to build a better future. Chapter 10: Legacy and Impact on Global Trade, 500 Words. Vasco da Gama's journeys changed the world. Before he found the sea route to India, people in Europe had to travel across land to get goods like spices, silk, and gold. These land routes were long, slow, and dangerous. But Vasco da Gama showed a new way, a way across the ocean. His discovery of the sea route to India opened a door between Europe and Asia. Now, ships could bring spices and other goods from India directly to Europe. This made trade faster, cheaper, and more powerful. It also helped Portugal become one of the richest and strongest countries in the world at that time. Vasco da Gama's voyages started a new age of global trade. Portuguese ships began to sail regularly between Europe, Africa, and Asia. They built trading posts and small colonies along the coast of Africa and in India. This was the beginning of a global trading network, a network that would connect people and products from all over the world. His success also pushed other countries to explore. Spain, England, the Netherlands, and France began to send their own explorers. The world started to grow smaller as people from different places met, traded, and learned from one another. But Vasco da Gama's impact was not only about trade. It also changed politics and power. European countries now wanted to control trade routes and important ports. This sometimes led to conflicts and wars with local rulers. Some people welcomed the Portuguese, while others resisted their control. Vasco da Gama also helped spread new ideas and knowledge. His voyages brought information about geography, weather, maps, and different cultures. People in Europe began to understand more about the world. New books were written, and schools taught students about places like India, Africa, and the sea. However, the legacy of Vasco da Gama is also mixed. While he brought trade and connection, his journeys also began a time of colonialism. This means that European countries started to control other lands and people. Sometimes they used force and were not always fair to the local people. Still, Vasco da Gama's name is remembered with respect in many parts of the world. He was the first European to reach India by sea, and that was a great achievement. His courage, skill, and leadership helped start a new chapter in world history. Today, many places are named after him: streets, schools, and even ships. Statues of him stand in Portugal and India. His story is told in books, museums, and classrooms. He showed that great things can happen when people are brave enough to explore the unknown. Vasco da Gama's legacy is one of adventure, trade, and global connection. He helped create the modern world where countries across the seas are no longer far apart, but linked through trade, travel, and the spirit of discovery. Vocabularies. 1. Explorer, a person who travels to unknown places to discover new things. Example: Vasco da Gama was a brave explorer who found a sea route to India. 2. Voyage, a long journey, usually by ship. Example: his voyage to India lasted many months. 3. Fleet, a group of ships that travel together. Example: Vasco da Gama led a fleet of 20 ships on his second trip to India. 4. Spices, special plant parts like pepper and cinnamon used to add taste to food. Example: European people wanted spices from India to make their food taste better. 5. Trade, the buying and selling of goods between people or countries. Example: Vasco da Gama went to India to start trade for Portugal. 6. Port, a place near the sea where ships stop to load or unload goods. Example: Calicut was a busy port where traders came from many lands. 7. Conflict, a fight or disagreement. Example: There was conflict between the Portuguese and local traders in India. 8. Legacy, what someone leaves behind after they are gone, like ideas or changes. Example, Vasco da Gama's legacy is the start of global sea trade. 9. Navigation, the skill of finding a way to travel, especially across the sea. Example, Vasco da Gama used the stars for navigation during his journey. 10. Empire, a large group of countries or lands ruled by one country or king. Example, Portugal began to build an empire in Asia after Vasco da Gama's voyages. Quiz questions. 1. Where was Vasco da Gama born? 2. What was the age of discovery mainly about? 3. In which year did Vasco da Gama begin his first journey to India? 4. What dangerous part of Africa did Vasco da Gama sail around? 5. What was the name of the Indian city Vasco da Gama first arrived in? 6. Who was the ruler of Calicut when Vasco da Gama visited? 7. What illness affected many sailors on the journey back to Portugal? 8. How many ships did Vasco da Gama lead on his second voyage to India? 9. What title was Vasco da Gama given when he returned to India as a leader? 10. What is Vasco da Gama's biggest impact on world trade? Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning with us. If you like this content, please like, subscribe, and share it with your friends and family. Your support helps us grow and bring you more inspiring stories and easy English learning content. Do you have a topic you'd like us to cover in our next video? Maybe a famous person, an invention, or a country. Let us know in the comments or messages. We'd love to hear your ideas. You can find answers in the description. Thanks again, and keep learning with us. See you in the next video.